Hello people, how are you? My name is Dilakshi and welcome to the Dr. Sage page where you get spiritual science for every single day life. So Dilakshi, what in the world is spiritual science? Glad you asked, let us show you. Yes, here right now. So we have a chemical reaction ready, set to go for us. We are testing out soil samples here. Why? Well, I'm trying to repurpose some old soil so we can grow some herbs, so we can plant some new seeds in repurposed old soil. Why? Well, because energy cannot be destroyed nor created. It can only be transformed, and that's when it's most effective. Why is that relevant to us? Well, think about us in the same way that we, in a lot of ways, carry a lot of outdated models, perspectives, ideas, personas that we might have taken on from early in life. And when we start to explore our own identity and create our own individuality, and we might find ourselves, and when we do find ourselves with the opposite perspective to what we've grown up with, and all of a sudden we have two different frequencies of the same continuum of perspectives existing within ourselves, and we find ourselves, well, we wonder why we react. We have two different pH working out there, and no wonder there's a reaction. So what do we usually do? Our tendency is to throw away the old while keeping the current, and we find ourselves even more in a deeper trouble. Because again, energy cannot be destroyed nor created. It can only be transformed. So the wisest and actually the most scientific and intelligent thing would be to take that old concept, identity, perspective, persona, whatever we're working with, and to look at this new vision that we're working towards, and to take that old and to start to transform it, to test out, find out what it needs, what's lacking, what's needing, until we get to this new state. So it's done with the most efficiency, and also we find ourselves using least amount of energy in the process, and we are happy. So this is how it's relevant to life. And so we're trying to test it out in the soil. So we took the soil from an old calla lily plant, and we're trying to figure out whether it needs more acid or base to be neutralized. So when I was trying to figure out whether it needed more acid or base, right away my brain was like, base, duh, my intuition, when it needs base. Why? Well, in our house we have a fireplace, and we've been burning a lot of wood throughout this winter times to keep us warm. So we've been having a vast amount of base in the house, ash in the house. So I told my mind to look out for a purpose, for it to be repurposed into something else. So when this situation presented itself, of course, my system went, light bulb, that's the answer, hence we call it intuition. Look at the world, look at the word, world, and also look at the world, but look at the word, intuition, break it down, in tune, you're in tune, your system is in tune to all the questions, all the subtleties in your system that's always looking for the solutions, the answers to the questions you already have that even you might have forgotten. So when all of a sudden your system is presented with what's the best solution at hand, you get an epiphany, you get an aha moment, and we call it intuition. So I got my intuition said, okay, it needs ash base, and also another perspective I was coming from was, if there's a need for something, the solution has to be there too, because opposites, there has to be a balance. There's an excess need for something, the solution is right there, hence it reminds me of a story. The cure for poison ivy, I believe, is apparently it grows right next to it. What is it called? I don't know, I'm forgetting the name of it, but yeah. So, where there's the need, the solution is right there too. So my system was like, okay, that makes sense, but we have to test it out, right? So that's where this chemical reaction comes in. So we put some soil samples in 2 dishes, the same soil samples, and we moistened it, and we're trying to figure out whether it needs more acid or base. How do we figure it out? Well, we're looking for a reaction here. What is a reaction? Reaction is when opposites come in, and they're opposite, and then we put them together, it reacts. In the same way, when we ourselves go out in the world, and when we find ourselves, when going back to that perspective again, when we have a certain perspective or belief or idea in our mind, and we go out there and we come in contact, or our system comes in contact with its opposite, its basic perspective or idea or way of life, we tend to get a reaction. It gets a reaction out of us, literally. That's why we call it that. That means, it's just they're from opposite perspectives, and we get triggered and we respond in that way. So that's what happens outside. The same thing we're trying to cause inside, so we can figure out what it needs. So what are we doing here? So since we're trying to figure out whether it needs acid or base, we have a base solution, which is just baking soda mixed in with some water. It's a concentrated basic solution. And for acid, we have our very favorite apple cider vinegar. So how does it work? So since we're trying to figure out what it needs, so if we put base into the soil, and if it's reacting to base, that means it's coming from its opposite perspective. So it means it's acidic in nature. So what does that mean? It needs base. Look at that. What it reacts with, it's actually what it needs to be balanced. It's amazing, right? The same way, if we get out there in the world and we have a reaction out of something, we might think that's our enemy, that's bad, that's this, that's that, but that's the exact same thing. To a more or less degree, that's the exact same thing that our system needs to be balanced, and that's how it indicates to you that it needs something by reacting to something, right? So we're gonna pour some basic and acidic solution into the soil to see what it reacts to. So whatever it reacts to, we know that's what it needs, because it's reacting to it because it's coming from this opposite perspective. So we are, let's see, okay, we are going to put some base. No, it's all baking soda-y. And some acid, and we're going to look for a reaction. So in this case, we're actually inducing a reaction, so we can see what something needs. Well, how is it relevant to life? Well, our system always does that. A system's always pointing it to us when, in terms of reaction, to hint to us that it needs that aspect. But we usually judge it, with our perspective and judge it good, bad. So we never take it into account our system's indication that that's the exact same thing it needs. But when it comes to, soil sample like this, it's easier to see that, right? But when it comes to us, because it involves us and we identify so much with a reaction as a reaction, not so much as, oh, it's just reacting, because we don't have that level of detachment within ourselves, we tend to suffer more. So let's see. So we're looking for reaction. I don't know. Since we're not really dealing with any high acidic basic content, that's why we're not seeing explosives. So what I'm paying attention to is visible reaction, which is actually less to none. So I'm looking for sounds. You can hear sizzling sounds when something's reacting. So, I've already done this. I'm just doing it with you guys too. So I hear sizzles. We hear more sizzles, of course, in the what? In the base. So, in the base. So that means that's the exact same thing that the soil needs, So my intuition was right. So this is what spiritual science is. Just like, from testing out the soil to using it as an analogy to life, and to look at our intuition from a different perspective, and to also back it up with this method. So spiritual science is not just about spirituality and science putting together. It's about this new form that's both and neither at the same time. That's together. That's this third thing that we're creating here. This is what is spiritual science. So what can spiritual science do for you? As you've seen, this is very relevant to life. It allows you to use any tool and every single thing that we see on the outside, and also everything that we studied in school. It allows us to use that as a tool in personal evolution, to enhance our life. And a lot of times, because a lot of scientific math concepts are portrayed and preached from a perspective that's not relevant to our everyday life, they get this misconception that it's never relevant to life, it has no use to life. It's actually the opposite. When used in the right context, when used in context to things, it's actually one of the greatest tools. In the same way, spirituality, the wisdom, when it's used in the right concept with method, it's the greatest tool for our personal evolution. So what does spiritual science offer to you? Exactly this. So when you unite these two, like you see when you unite these two and look at things from the spiritual scientific perspective, we also naturally come to have this detachment to our internal, external reactions and all that's happened. So we can look at things from a detached perspective, and we too can look at our own life as the soil sample testing, where we go from just reacting to things and then coming back and reflecting on what we need, and correcting it. So we go from that perspective to actively, so when we create this detachment to our life with spiritual science, and we actively go into our life and improve our life, seeking actually at times these might not be harsh, but triggering situations so we can figure out what it needs. So what does that create in the world? Less judgment. Imagine you're going into the world and you're reacting to something, and you no longer tend to be like, oh, that's good, bad, and you're all of a sudden you're more able to be like, whoa, that's what I need because it's triggering me, So imagine what kind of character it can build inside of yourself. You can look at something that's getting the best of reaction out of you with the most of compassion and love. That's what in spirituality and spiritual perspective they talk about. Where whoever is your best friend is your enemy. Who is your enemy is your best friend. This is what they're talking about. To look at things from opposite perspective, consciously, actively, to improve ourselves. So this is what we are committed to at the Dr. Sage page, and with spiritual science and uniting spirituality and science, and creating this third form that allows us to exercise our natural level of detachment while connecting our own spiritual and scientific nature. Because as we look within us, we all have, in relative terms, in our own way, our own spiritualist, yeah, I think that's a word, and our own scientist. And because not only on the inside, because on the outside too, these two have different levels of language and modes of thinking. Until now, they seem to have their own clashes, because they're coming from opposite perspective and they're reacting. We wonder why we're reacting. So here we seem to neutralize the base so we can grow new seeds. So we seem to we committed to not only connecting spirituality and science, and taking that and going further and actively using that to evolve our consciousness. How do we do that? Well, one, check out our blog posts. We share beautiful things like this, where we connect spirituality and science in these simple everyday matters all the time. And also, in a much more concentrated way, we offer amazing services where we're all about creating these identities, these concentrated identities within ourselves first. So, and tapping into this next levels of technology within us. We're going beyond connecting spirituality and science, and we take that and actively evolve ourselves into at the highest state we possibly can. Sounds amazing, right? Check out the identity blog post in our blog section, and also the 28-day detox plan. That's the first place to start. And also the mudra videos to tap into our nervous systems and seeing how to access your full potential within yourself. So we have great stuff, people. Check them out. And thanks for actually being here with us. I don't know where that came from. The spiritual scientist.